In the Derby tables that follow, a top is defined as more than 1 point faster than the previous top. A pair is defined as within 1 point either way of the previous top. An off race is more than 1 point through 4 points worse than the top. And an X is more than 4 points worse. We did not use a 2020 Derby in any of our studies because it was run in September, not May. As we say every year, it's worth remembering that despite all the talk of how great they are training, most Derby runners will not run their race. About 2/3 run off races or X's. Only 2 or 3 horses a year run new tops, and some of those horses and tops are too slow to matter, which means in general you want a horse that is already fast enough to be competitive, and in this year's deep and competitive Derby, that looks like one that has run a Thoro-Graph 3 or better. In terms of number of starts as a 3-year-old, 2 preps produces the most new tops, but 3 preps produces about the same percentage of combined new and paired tops. 4 or more starts as a 3-year-old has clearly been worse, with more than half running X's. The 2 patterns that have produced good performances in the Derby are those coming in off a pair of tops and coming in off a top of less than 3 points. Both of those patterns have yielded over 40% newer paired tops. Every other pattern has produced terrible results. That includes those coming in following tops of 3 points or more, as many of the fastest horses are this year. Over 80% of those don't run back to their last race, and most run X's. In general, very few run new tops unless they come into the Derby off a pair or a small new top. In evaluating how a Derby horse will run following a new top, one thing that turns out to be significant is the amount of development from the horse's 2-year-old top to his 3-year-old top. Horses that have already developed more than 4 points almost never run new tops in a Derby, and more than half run X's. Horses that have not already developed that much have done much better. And as we'll see, this raises a lot of questions for many of the fastest horses coming into the race this year. So, we've established 3 criteria for horses that do run their race in a Derby. Horses with 3 or less preps, horses coming in either off a pair of tops or a small new top, and horses who have not developed more than 4 points from the 2-year-old top. Now let's break it down by how horses have run relative to how many of those boxes they checked. Not surprisingly, there was direct correlation between the number of boxes checked and how the horses ran. Those that checked all 3 boxes have at least paired their top in the Derby more than half the time. But remember, that just means the horse ran well relative to his previous top, not well compared to the other horses. He still has to be fast enough for it to matter. As always, the Derby has a huge field, so ground loss will be a major factor. Each path on each turn is worth a length, which in turn is worth 1/2 Thoro-Graph point at this distance. That means if one horse gets a rail trip and another is 3 wide on both turns, that's a 2-point advantage to the inside horse. Flip them and it's a 4-point swing. Post position, running style, and jockey's choices matter a lot in the Derby. There's a long run to the first turn of the Derby, and with a mix of speed horses and closers, the field should spread out. So riders' decisions and running style should matter more than post position. Still, with a 20-horse field, far outside posts are never an advantage. Admire Daytona did a lot of developing to get to that figure in Dubai, and still isn't fast enough. Lucas horses show up often, and American Promise will be making his 10th start in the Derby. He improved when blinkers were added last fall and eventually established a solid top in his last start of that year. In his 3rd start of this year, he jumped to a very big figure, a 4-point top, which also represented 4 points of development from his 2-year-old top. Ordinarily, we would toss a horse off a big new top, but Lucas horses run weird patterns, and the studies don't include too many horses that came into the Derby with 7 weeks rest. And there's this. We don't go far enough back to have all of them, but with a decent sample size, 40% of Lucas's Derby runners have at least paired their tops. Pairing his last would put American Promise right in the middle of this, and he will be a big prize. As we write this, we don't know whether Baeza will get to run. But for all the noise about journalism's tough trip, this guy got the better number in the Santa Anita Derby because he was wider on the turns. With only a turf trial last year, this colt doesn't really have a 2-year-old top, but he's more straightforward, meaning his earlier efforts didn't set him back, and he's come a long way in a short time to a big number. This is another that we might play to bounce if he was the favorite, but he won't be, and he's one of the fastest horses in the race. And one more thing. Sheriffs has run 4 horses in the Derby, and two of them have run new tops. Burnham Square paired up solid efforts at the end of last year, moved to a new level in his first start this year, paired again, then jumped last time. That one represents 6 points of development for his 2-year-old top and is almost a 3-point new top. And here, the jump is from an established level. We might take a more positive view if he had run the 4 once and blown right through it like Baeza did. This gelding is one of many that are fast enough to win with a good trip, but have suspect patterns. Remember, most Derby horses don't run their race. Chunk of Gold actually checks all 3 boxes and will probably run well for Chunk of Gold, but he starts out too slow. Citizen Bull ran a big figure for a 2-year-old to win the juvenile, and when he basically paired that number in his 3-year-old debut, he looked to be a major player in the division. But he needed to make a forward move last time and instead went back, and not just a little. I can't remember Baffert bringing a horse into this race following a bad effort. It's not a good Derby pattern, and the division has caught up with Citizen Bull. Cole Battle did a lot of developing to get to his top in February, which makes more short-term development unlikely, and we don't like the backward move last time. East Avenue ran well in his debut and much better going 2 turns in his second start, establishing a very strong 2-year-old top. He then ran a stinker with an excuse in the Breeders' Cup and another without one at Fairgrounds. They added blinkers for his last, and whether or not it was cause and effect, he immediately got back to his 2-year-old top. So if we don't regard that too bad to be true stinkers as meaningful, what we have is a horse who matched his big 2-year-old top in what was effectively his first start at 3, which is a good pattern. This colt actually checks all 3 boxes. Some other points. This colt gets a positive rider change, comes out of a barn that has gotten some big new tops recently, and is a Godolphin runner in a big race. Of the horses that have already run a 3 or better, this is the most likely one to run a new top. Final Gambit jumped to a figure last time that still leaves him short of competitive, and there's no reason to think he'll be faster on dirt. Flying Mohawk is another relatively slow grass horse running on the dirt in the Derby, because he can. You won't very often see a horse get beat 3 lengths at level weights, yet earn a much better figure than the winner. But that's what happened in the Wood Memorial. Rondé was wide on both turns while the winner saved ground, and the figure he earned that day would give him a big shot here. But that was a 5-point new top, so this is another fast horse with a problematic pattern. Journalism marched forward to a strong top in December, then jumped 5 points to a new top in his first start this year before going back a couple of points last time. Yes, Mystic Dan won off a backward move last year, but he didn't get back to his top or come close to running the best figure in the race. He only won because Brian Hernandez hugged the rail. Journalism is the fastest horse on his best, but horses coming in following a top and a backward move have not run well in the Derby, and we don't think Journalism will. We are against him as the favorite. We can't swear by our dirt figures for young Japanese horses, so we'll just say Luxor Cafe looks like a borderline contender on number power and has what looks like a decent pattern. 2 other things here. First, this guy has had some wide trips and definitely can't do that here. And second, there's some serious grass on the damn side of his pedigree. Neo Equus ran a good figure last fall sprinting and paired that effort in his last 2 going long. The sire's runners do better going a distance, as you can see in his sire profile. And this colt actually checks all three boxes. Neo-Equus goes into this race a little too slow, but he should run his race. Owen Almighty ran fast early in his career and finally broke through his 2-year-old top, 2 back at Tampa. He's had 4 preps, and we also don't like the backward move last time, as previously discussed. Publisher threw a big top out of nowhere at the end of last year, which took something out of him. But he did come around and ran a 2-point new top last time, which also represented 2 points of development from his 2-year-old top. This colt was similar to American Promise, except not as fast and without as much development. Asmussen's Derby results have been about average, and Publisher is a little slow going in, but he does check all 3 boxes. Render Judgment also checks all 3 boxes, but he's slow. And with the flat pattern, we don't expect a big jump. Rodriguez was the beneficiary of the ground loss disparity with Grande in the Wood, but he did run a new top that was fast enough to make him competitive here. This is yet another fast horse with an iffy pattern. He's had 4 preps, and he's developed almost 6 points already. No, you are not seeing double. Sandman and Burnham Square are pretty much brothers from another mother, which means this is another that is fast enough to contend, but has a questionable pattern. This colt has developed a lot already, and we think he's going to develop some more, but probably not right now. The Belmont or the Travers might be a different story. Which brings us to Sovereignty. Strong 2-year-old top, check, and he paired it. 2 preps, check. Pair of tops, check. Less than 4 points of development, check. Plus 5 weeks rest, plus Godolphin in a big race. Bill Mott's Derby runners have pretty much been par for the course, but overall, of the horses that have already run fast, Sovereignty is the most likely to run his race. For this one, the issues are going to involve his ability to work out a trip and the possibility of someone running faster or working out a better trip. Tistastic was stuck at a mediocre level for months before breaking through in Louisiana Derby. It's tough to project another forward move right away, and he would need one to contend. As usual, we will divide the Derby field into 4 groups. The D group contains the horses we give almost no shot of getting any piece of this. Cold Battle, Final Gambit, Flying Mohawk, Render Judgment, and Tistastic. The C group contains the ones that are marginally better, but we don't really like and can't use. Admire Daytona, Chunk of Gold, Citizen Bull, and Owen Almighty. The B group has a large group of horses that have something to recommend but also have flaws. Neo-Equus isn't quite fast enough, but he could be ready to run a new top. Luxury Cafe goes here because we don't really know where else to put him. The others have already run a number good enough to get a piece of this, if not win, but their patterns are the issue. American Promise, Burnham Square, Grande, Journalism, Rodriguez, and Sandman. The A group contains the must-use horses, the 2 Godolphins, East Avenue and Sovereignty, as well as Baeza if he gets in. So first of all, we still don't know whether Baeza will get in, and it matters, not just because that horse has a big shot, but because if Pratt rides Neo-Equus, it's very unlikely he'll send him hard alongside Citizen Bull, and is more likely to save ground sitting behind him. If Neo-Equus gets a rail trip, he will have a 1 or 2 point advantage over the average runner and could get a piece of this without even going forward. The second comment involves East Avenue. If they were just going to send, they probably would not have made the switch to Franco. If East Avenue makes the lead, it's likely it's because the horse wants to, not the connections. Third, Pratt is very ground loss conscious, and if Baeza does get in, best guess is he's no more than 3 wide around the first turn, which is manageable. The post is more of a concern for Sovereignty, who will almost certainly run well, but definitely could lose while running the best figure if he's wide on the turns. But the headline here, for sure, is that we're taking a stand against journalism. The favorite will be on about half the trifecta tickets, so a spread play could offer a lot of value. We're going to use the A horses, and depending on whether Baeza gets in, some of the Bs. Definitely Neo Equus and American Promise. Possibly others if Baeza does not get in, and they're big prices.